The newest exhibit at the National Firearms Museum in Fairfax, Virginia, is entitled by resolution of Congress. And we're all familiar with the Medal of Honor, but that wasn't actually instituted until 1861. They actually didn't give them out until 1863. But America had been in a number of conflicts before then that challenged our patriots to perform above and beyond the call of duty, as the Medal of Honor citations would later record. And during the American Revolution, George Washington wanted to begin a series of medals, or badges of merit, as he originally wrote in 1782. And the very first ones were 3 badges of merit that were awarded to NCOs and a private. And as per Washington's direction, they were to be in the shape of a heart, colored purple, and with the word merit written across the front of them. And to this day, we know where 2 of the 3 are, and one of the other one burned in a house fire. So there are only 2 of the original 3 still out there. One's in New York and the other in New Hampshire. What we know today is the Purple Heart, a medal for having been wounded in combat, wasn't instituted till 1932. So you kind of have a void for quite a while. And Washington also talked Congress into awarding 15 swords for valor and services. One of his adjutants got a sword, but others were given out for valor. And of the 50, these are all made in Paris. They're gorgeous. The blades are blued with gold inlay. The hilts are sterling silver, rose gold, yellow gold, and I believe platinum, because they're exquisite. And of the 15 that Congress had made in Paris, we know of where 8 of them are currently. And this museum has 2 of them on exhibit. When the War of 1812 came around, Congress also decided to award swords for displays of valor. They awarded, I believe, 27 swords. Again, 8 are known, and we have 3 of them on exhibit here currently. That makes them pretty rare, and the fact that we have almost a voting majority of the ones known is pretty interesting. But they're beautiful gold swords with acid-etched blades with an inscription and presentation by resolution of Congress to the guys that earned them.
Interestingly, besides the swords, because we're a gun museum for the most part, there is a rifle there, and it is a Hall rifle. And there were a group of 17 young men that volunteered to defend Plattsburgh, New York, against a British incursion from Canada. And these guys were promised a rifle by the general. And eventually, Congress cashed that check and gave each of these young men a rifle. But by the time they actually gave them the rifle, they weren't young men anymore. This is a battle that occurs in 1814, and the rifles aren't presented until the 1820s. Halls are interesting, right? Really the first breech loader ever used by the United States military. And during the War of 1812, the Hall was just an idea. It wasn't actually a rifle. And Congress allocated these guns from production from the Hall Rifle Works in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia now, then just plain old Virginia, because there was no West Virginia. And so, there were only 17 of them. And, you think about the number of Valor Awards that were given out early in the founding of our nation. It's not a lot. It's 17 swords here, or it's 15 swords there, or it's 17 rifles. Recognizing valor was something that was done, but you had to do something really extraordinary. And to pull all of these things together is really remarkable. You just don't see this, let alone, putting those swords together with the Hall rifle. It wasn't until the American Civil War that a medal was created that we know today as the Medal of Honor. It was given out not as a medal of extreme gallantry. Some of the Civil War recipients that did get the Medal of Honor, yes, they did incredibly brave things. But at the same time, you also had a regiment that just enlonged their enlistment, and everybody there got a Medal of Honor. You had Medal of Honors given to Abraham Lincoln's pallbearers. You had Medals of Honor given to guys in the 1870s and 80s that just rode into Congress and basically said, hey, I did a really good job, I'd like to have a medal. And so the Medal of Honor that we think of today during the Civil War era, not the same medal. The thing about this exhibit is we actually have Medals of Honor, and some of them sadly were rescinded, but it takes nothing away from the medal. It takes nothing away from the idea behind it.
So not far from where we sit right now in Fairfax at the National Firearms Museum, just a few exits down the road is the Manassas National Battlefield Park. And one of the more interesting exhibits in the visitor center there is the full, complete uniform of Francis Brownell. And the reason why Brownell is there is because he is the first soldier listed in the chronological roll of having earned the Medal of Honor. We're very fortunate to have Colonel Byron Crutchen's medal, actually 2 medals. He was awarded a medal for an action at Horseshoe Bend, Kentucky during the war. He didn't receive the medal until the 1890s. And by then the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic, was so large in membership, their membership badge looked identical to the Medal of Honor. And so General Gillespie, who himself had earned the Medal of Honor, in 1904 redesigned it to the medal that we now know today, with the robin's egg blue ribbon and the white stars on it, so that it would be easily distinguished from the GAR membership badge. And so General McCutcheon had 2 of those. He had one of each style. Nelson A. Miles, who was the commander-in-chief of all the United States Armed Forces in the latter part of the 19th century, received one for actions at Chancellorsville, Virginia, in May of 1863. And we have his medal. A guy named John Berry, who was the first sergeant assigned as a member of the Invalid Corps, wounded veterans, to accompany President Lincoln's body back to its final resting place in Springfield, Illinois. Now, an interesting thing, in 1917, Congress decided to kind of clean up the medal and look at who had actually received them. So about 800 medals were all engraved with the regimental names and sent to their commanding officer. Few were given out, but most sat in a barn. And Congress said, no, and they rescinded these medals. They rescinded about 950 of the ones they'd given out. Buffalo Bill lost his, Dr. Mary Walker, and the 12 guys that served as Lincoln's pallbearers and bodyguards on his funeral cortege. So we have one of the rescinded medals from Congress. And we're very lucky. Marvin Applewhite and Norm Flaterman donated these. Jack Lewis of Lewis and Grant Auctioneers helped facilitate the transfer of these because they can't be sold anymore. And so finding a home with a historical institution such as ours is a great boon to our collections and being able to tell this story.
You come through the National Firearms Museum and you see this case, and it's dominated by a Gilbert Stuart painting of George Washington. When you look at this painting, you see, the father of our country, the father of, frankly, modern human freedom, and that painting is looking down over swords and guns and medals that represent the greatest of bravery and sacrifice that Americans have exhibited in combat.